to simply kind of walk you through where I've left this computer. This will be the last thing I do before I put Windows 7 back on here with a fresh install. So over here I've got 4 pretty nice pieces of freeware that I've used to help get you set up. But before I talk about those, I made a separate partition on this computer called Utilities. I'll just press on that. I'm doing all this with touch and pen, and in it there's a folder called Tx2 stuff, and in there you'll find a OneNote notebook, which I have open right here. It just kind of has a few items. Talks about how I set this up for kind of the smoothest and most hassle-free use. So I've got the ISO files for Windows 7 and Office 2007. So if you scratch the disks or lose the disks, you can burn yourself a new copy using the DVD burner on this computer. I got all the important drivers from these 3 zip files right here. They're from N-Trig, so they're the touchscreen drivers. And then all these are the kind of important drivers from the HP website. So I think I put the link, in here in this notebook to where I downloaded those drivers from. I also, for power management, so one of the complaints that a lot of people had about this computer is that it gets hot and really loud. So we open up this little utility called Core Temp. Not sure if there we go. So what it does, it'll show you the temperature all the time. If you minimize it, it goes down the system tray. Typically, if things stay below 65, the fan doesn't jump into kind of hairdryer mode. And there's a couple ways that you can help keep this computer cool that aren't as crazy as like undervolting the processor and some of the stuff that people did in their forums. So one, if you go to the power management, they usually have 2 preset ones. I take the power saver, go to the plan settings, change the advanced settings, and under processor management, just make the maximum processor state 50%. It kind of takes your computer down to like a dual core netbook, but it runs pretty smoothly no matter even so. Like for example, right now I'm using that that setting, and I'm screencasting. The processor never going over 1.15 megahertz. In fact, sometimes one of them's even down here at its 0.25% state. You can see that the load is floating around 50 to 80%, 50 to 90%. On the graphics power setting, you'll want to put maximize battery life for both of those, and just those 2 things right there really make a big difference. And even further, if you change the theme to one of the basic themes, not using the arrow theme, you don't get the arrow peak like when you hover over the windows, but you still, if I were to have multiple windows open like this, you can still get the preview with the title of the window, even though it's not going to give you the preview on the screen. That's just something you'll have to balance for yourself. If you would prefer to have the convenience of the arrow interface, you might trade off with a little bit of performance and a little bit of heat. So that's pretty much it for heat management. I went over all the drivers and the convenient freeware. So image burn. This is what I use to make copies of your backup copies of the Windows 7 and Office 2007. You can go from DVD to an ISO image and back, to burning a new DVD. Space Sniffer is really cool. It's a really lightweight application that'll show you kind of what files are taking up space on your computer. The partition manager is what I use to split off this little utilities partition. So you can do a fresh install of Windows on your main hard drive, on the C drive, and still have all your drivers and stuff saved on E. It's a little bit smoother than like burning a disk and all that. Core temp, just to keep an eye on your temperature, and then this A-tube catcher, which is what I use to screencast. So you'll see that, just to demonstrate, if I switch plan settings, for no real reason, I'm plugged in, so look at that, boom, instantly up to 74, 75 degrees Celsius. And that's because of that 2.3 gigahertz. When it runs at full speed, it just gets really hot. So change that to power saver, and this should start going back down pretty quickly. At least I hope it will. But anyway, one final thing is you want to update to Internet Explorer 9. For example, I'll open up Google Chrome. I'll go to eBay as well. So they both work fine, right? You can kind of do kinetic scrolling, but if you click on, like, see up here on the enter your search keyword, if I click on that, I don't get any kind of pop-up I have to come over here and click this to enter the keyboard. Whereas with Internet Explorer, get out of there. If I touch here in this box, because Windows kind of has a better interface with its own software, I can just type right here in the search field. It gives me the keyboard pop-up, and that's a little smoother than the integration with Chrome. So Chrome gives you a little more real estate. You can see up here the distance between here and here is a little bit, yeah, it's actually about the same. So I like both. And I think that's about it. The problems I was having with the touch screen seem to have resolved themselves. So I don't know if that was, if I use touch, I can now draw. Fingers. I can now draw down here in this corner and up here in this corner. If I rotate the screen, so you won't be able to see that the screen is now rotated 180 degrees, but this corner up here is where I was having the trouble, and so now it's totally good. So that must be like a power interference kind of thing, and that must have been plugged into a bad outlet. Don't know. So anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Highly recommend you use some of the tips and settings. I really like, it took some getting used to, but having the start bar over here on the right and things like that really seem to make a difference. And let's see how we ended up here on the temperature. Yeah, so it cooled back off to the mid-60s. This TJ Max is like the maximum allowable temperature before it like shuts itself down automatically. And then the min and the max here are the max that it's recorded since core temp's been running.